Have you ever felt that no matter how hard you try, no matter how much you deliver results, no matter how much you exceed your goals, will you never be recognized because your boss already has his favorite? That colleague who is not even that good but who is always at the coffee shop at the right time, always shows up smiling in the right places, always knows exactly what to say to be noticed, even when he delivers absolutely nothing. That's that. In the real world, the one who gets promoted isn't always the most competent. In fact, in many companies, being good at what you do is not enough. The promotion goes to those who know how to play the game of influence. And often, what really counts is not your work, it's your waste game. But calm down, that's not your fault. Most people enter the job market believing that it is enough to be efficient, productive, honest, that if you do your part, recognition comes. But in the corporate environment, there is a hidden game, an invisible theater. And if you don't understand these rules, you can spend your entire life being the most competent in the industry and still be ignored. Have you ever experienced that situation where a project you led was praised, but did the credit end up on someone else's desk? Or when you had an idea, shared it with the team, and suddenly the favorite appears presenting it as if it were his, and the boss still applauds. These situations destroy anyone's motivation. It's like you're swimming against an invisible current, and with each extra effort, it feels like someone is holding you by the back. And the worst, many times outsiders think you're exaggerating. You comment to someone, "I think I'm being sabotaged." And the answer comes dry. "Oh, that's all in your head. You have to be more political." As if the problem were you, as if putting up with gossip, manipulation, and rug pulling was a natural part of the game. But let me tell you something very clearly. You're not crazy. You're waking up. He is realizing what really happens behind the scenes of the work environment. And believe me, this is the first step to turn the tide. The truth is that there are two types of professionals: those who are good and they are waiting for recognition, and those who are good and they know how to protect themselves and stand out even when they are not part of the clique. Yes, it is possible to be promoted even without the favorite badge. It is possible to grow in your career without pulling a punch, without becoming a sycophant, without betraying your values. But for that, you need to understand the hidden rules of the corporate game. You need to see beyond the politics of coffee and superficial sympathy. You need to have a strategy. And if you've come this far, it's because you're tired of being ignored, tired of being good and not being seen, tired of seeing mediocre people being promoted while you hold the bar of entire sectors on your back. And you know what's worse. Sometimes the boss himself feeds this favoritism without realizing it. He repeats the name of the darling in meetings, listens more to his opinions, trusts more in suggestions, while you, who carry the piano, barely have space to speak. You start to ask yourself, is it me who is the problem? But I'll show you that the problem is in the system, and that you can hack this system without losing its essence. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly what I did, how I was promoted even though I was not part of the group, even without pulling the boss's ass, even though he is left out of certain conversations. I learned to play the game differently, and I'll show you how. But first, you need to understand why this happens. Why do companies continue to promote the most sociable rather than the most competent? Why does meritocracy fail so much when it comes to internal recognition? And more importantly, how you can emotionally shield yourself, keep your performance high, and still make your name circulate positively behind the scenes, even without having to force friendship with anyone. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that people who are too good, too quiet, who don't take a stand, it becomes a carpet. And you weren't born for that. Let's talk about how to turn the tide. Because when you understand the invisible rules, you stop being just competent and start being strategically indispensable. And that's where the big turning point comes in, which no one talks about out loud. Favoritism at work has nothing to do with deserving. Nothing. You can be the most technical, the most punctual, the most efficient, and still be invisible to who decides who gets up and who stays still. The reality is that many bosses don't promote based on merit, they promote based on affinity, in sympathy, in convenience, and this creates a system that silently sabotages those who actually make it happen. It's hard to admit that, right? Because we grow up hearing that those who dedicate themselves reap the rewards, that hard work always pays off. But the corporate environment is not fair by default. And when you don't understand how this game actually works, you start to doubt yourself. You start to think you're failing, when in fact you're just playing the right game on the wrong board. And then frustration grows, discouragement sets in, and performance drops. Not because you're weak, but because you're emotionally worn out from rowing against this invisible tide. But let me tell you something that perhaps no one has said before. This is not the end of the line. That doesn't mean you're doomed to be a supporting actor in your own movie. It just means that you need to learn what's behind this behavior. Because yes, favoritism is real, but it can be neutralized with strategy, not with falsehood, not with sack-pulling, but with clever positioning and awareness of the game being played around you. You know, that kind of boss who always defends the same people in meetings, even when the idea was flawed. The one who gives space to certain names, but completely ignores what you say, even when you have a solid argument, dice in hand and results on the table. This happens because he has already built a mental image of who he values, and this is a game of perception, not reality. But most people don't understand this, and end up withdrawing, keeping silent, giving up taking a stand. But that's exactly where the key to the turn lies. When you understand that favoritism is an emotional construct and not an evaluation of competence, you stop feeling defeated. You begin to realize that there is indeed a breach, that there is a way to turn the tide. Because whoever built this image, you can deconstruct it too. And those who ignore you today, tomorrow may have no choice but to recognize you when you learn to make your presence felt, even without shouting. Let me tell you a real story. A follower of mine, let's call her Julia to preserve her identity, worked in a sector full of rivalry and sabotage. She was the most experienced on the team, held deadlines, solved problems that others couldn't, but was never remembered. Her boss only had eyes for a colleague who was always glued to him, always gifting, complimenting, starting a conversation out of turn. Result? He was promoted, praised in public, and even took credit for things that Julia herself did behind the scenes. She sent me a message, saying, "I'm at the limit. I love what I do, but every day I come home feeling useless, like I'm invisible." And look, it broke my heart, but it also gave me the chance to show her what I'm bringing here to you now. I taught Julia to change the way she positioned herself, to create strategic visibility, to know how to play the mental game, to make allies who could mention her name in important contexts, and above all, to document each delivery, to transform her work into non-negotiable arguments. Do you know what happened after 3 months? Her boss, the same one who only saw the darling, was pressured by another manager to recognize Julia publicly because her results began to appear in the performance reports of other sectors. She didn't have to fawn. It had to be strategic. Today, she occupies a position above that colleague who was the favorite. Because she understood the game, it has moved out of the illusion of automatic meritocracy and into the reality of intentional visibility. That's what a lot of people don't understand. Being ignored does not disqualify you. It just means that you still don't understand the invisible rules of the corporate game. You're playing fair on a field where others are using shortcuts. But instead of descending to the level of falsehood and toxic politicking, what you need is method, strategic presence, and emotional courage to step out of the shadows and into the center of the conversation. And when you start to see favoritism for what it really is, a game of perception, not value, everything changes. Because from that moment on, you stop wasting energy trying to be accepted and start spending energy building authority. You stop chasing recognition and start attracting him naturally because you become a reference even outside the boss's radar. And then, my friend, even if he resists, he can no longer ignore it. Many people think that being strategic is being manipulative, but it is not. To be strategic is to know how to position yourself in an environment where silence erases you. It is understanding that those who are not seen are not remembered, and that unfortunately, those who do not take a stand end up being left behind by those who shout louder, even delivering less. This happens all the time, and if you've been through it, you know how much it hurts. It's a kind of silent frustration which is corroding inside because you feel like you're being wronged, but you don't have proof. There is no one to shout to. And the worst, if he screams, he is still called too dramatic or too sensitive. Therefore, this video is to show you that there is another way, a path that doesn't require you to change who you are, but it requires you to understand the environment you are in. That requires you to stop acting like the world is fair and start acting like someone who knows how to play with emotional intelligence, with long-term vision, with reputation building, even when the scenario seems to be against you. Because if there's something that the corporate environment teaches quickly, it's that being good at what you do is just the beginning. The real game starts when you understand how to get your name out there, even when they try to leave you out of the conversation. And that's the turn I want you to have, because I've been there. I know what it's like to be invisible. I know what it's like to give blood and see someone else take the applause. But I also know how to turn this around. And that's exactly what I'm going to show you from now on. And look, I only understood all this when I lived it in my skin. For years, I was that professional who delivered more than I received. I hit the finish line. He helped colleagues. He rescued dead projects. But at the end of the day, the recognition always went to someone else, someone with less delivery and more time of conversation thrown away in the cafe. And as much as I tried to convince myself that one day they would realize my value, that time never came. I remember a specific time. I participated in a supply chain restructuring project that saved the company literally thousands of dollars. I collected data, created reports, trained people. But at the time of the final presentation, the manager of the neighboring sector spoke, who had heard the idea of singing and entered the play at the last minute. He used beautiful terms, presented with that theatrical charisma, and took the applause. The board loved it. Guess who was called to lead a new project soon after? He and me. Silence. Informal gratitude, perhaps a good job in the hallway, but nothing official. No real visibility. That day I got home and seriously thought about quitting, not out of weakness, but out of emotional exhaustion. I was very tired. The feeling was one of uselessness, the feeling of spinning in circles, surrounded by a system that only values those who know how to sell themselves. That's when I decided to stop playing as a supporting player and really study how to stand out intelligently, even outside the bubble of favorites. I started slowly. The first change was to stop expecting others to see my value and to start showing my results strategically, not arrogantly, not with cheap self-promotion, but with intelligence. For example, every report I delivered started to have comparative data, before and after, tangible gains. When I emailed them, I included all the names involved, but I always put a spotlight on the key points that had been led by me. I've learned that if you don't show impact, no one bothers to look for it. The second turning point was to change my behavior in meetings. Before, I was the type who only spoke when asked, but this is a common mistake. If you don't take up space, it's taken up by others. So I started preparing in advance. I always brought at least one proposal, one analysis, one idea that would add real value to the discussion. It wasn't supposed to appear. It was to influence. And it worked. I could see how the mood changed when I calmly and confidently put a solution on the table. People began to look at me as a reference, not just as a good executor. Another point was to understand the power of silent alliances. I stopped trying to get into the sycophant group and focused on building connection with people who had real weight, even if they weren't popular. I began to help these people in a sincere way, to share useful information, to praise their achievements publicly. Gradually, they began to mention my name in important contexts. They started to include me in discussions. And when someone spoke ill of me, guess who defended me? These allies. That's when my reputation started to spread, without me having to force anything. And do you know what the result was? One day, my name appeared as a spontaneous indication to take on a new front in the company. It wasn't because I was the coolest. It wasn't because I was part of the club. It was because I had results, visibility, and internal support. When the announcement of the promotion was made, I clearly saw in the eyes of some people that mixture of surprise and discomfort, because I wasn't the expected profile. But then I understood. The tables turn when you play with the right cards, and not with the cards you were dealt. And if you think you need to yell or flatter to achieve this, let me tell you with certainty, you don't. What you need is strategy, clarity, and courage to act even when no one applauds you, because in the beginning, no one will applaud. But the results you build speak, and when they speak loud enough, even those who tried to ignore you start to listen. This turn was not magic. It took time, but every step was calculated. Each action was designed to strengthen my image without losing the essence, because I refused to be another one who trades value for visibility. I chose to build respect, not just popularity. And when you learn to do that, favoritism loses strength, manipulation loses impact, and recognition is no longer a matter of luck. It becomes a consequence. By the way, if you've experienced something similar, comment below. I want to know. Have they left you behind even after handing everything over? Have you ever seen someone less prepared being promoted just because they were closer to the boss? Tell me. Write anyway. I've lived this, or I've been invisible. Let's see how many people identify with this reality that almost no one has the courage to talk about. And stay with me, because now I'm going to show you the 3 practical strategies that really work to turn this game around without having to get dirty. These are simple but powerful attitudes that completely transform the way people see you in the workplace. Let's go to the part where the game really starts to change. Follow me, and this is where the game really starts to change. Because once you understand that flattering, forcing sympathy, or living for the approval of others is not the way, you start to ask yourself, so what can I do to be recognized without losing my essence? And the answer, although it seems simple, carries a gigantic power. There are silent strategies that work much more than the cry of those who want to appear. Strategies that do not require falsehood, but intelligence. That they do not depend on luck, but on intention, and that any professional, including you, can apply from now on. The first of these is what I call silent visibility, and let me explain to you how it works. In the workplace, many people believe that visibility is synonymous with self-promotion, that to be seen, you need to speak louder, show off, sell yourself all the time. But the truth is that the most respected professionals are those whose impact speaks for them, even if they're not in the room. This means that you need to deliver so much value, so consistently and intelligently, that the effect of your work is visible even when you're not there to explain it. And for that, you need to think beyond the gross delivery. It's no use just hitting the goal. You need to structure your work in such a way that the result has traceability, context, and clear consequence. An example: if you solved an operational problem, don't just say, "I solved it." Present the impacts. How much time was saved, how many steps were optimized, what bottlenecks were eliminated. When you do this, You turn an invisible task into an undeniable argument, and that completely changes the weight of your presence. I personally started to apply this in a very subtle way. I didn't keep sending emails with "look what I did," but I started to present my results in a visual way. I used simple charts, executive summaries, small reports focused on earnings, and most importantly, I delivered it without noise, without having to force attention. And then the magic begins, because when the impact is real, it draws attention on its own. And little by little, leaders began to call me to give my opinion, even on matters that were not exactly my function. Why? Because they started to associate my name with solution, clarity, and result. Now, the second strategy that completely changed the way I grew professionally was something I call horizontal reputation. Because usually, when we think about being recognized, we focus only on impressing the boss, right? But there's a quiet power in the strategic colleagues who work with you, who cross in paths with you in the hallways, who share meeting rooms, who live behind the scenes. These are the people who talk about you when you're not there, and it is at this moment that his real image is built. What I started to do, very intentionally, was to create small, sincere alliances. I'm not talking about flattering anyone. I'm talking about delivering real value to these people as well. Help without expecting anything in return. Sharing knowledge. Defend when he perceived an injustice. And, above all, to recognize their work publicly, honestly. This created a domino effect, because naturally they started to mention me in conversations with other leaders. They started to indicate my name when opportunities arose. And the most incredible, I didn't have to ask. The reputation was built by impact and respect, and this has a much greater weight than any compliment forced from top to bottom. You may be thinking, but my environment is toxic. People compete with each other. No one wants to help anyone. And I understand, I've been to places like this too, but even in these environments, there are observant people. People who value consistency, and you need to learn to see them, to connect with those who have values aligned with yours, because a good word at the right time from someone respected is worth more than dozens of attempts to please the boss directly. And finally, the third strategy, and perhaps the most powerful, is to learn to document your results in silence. That's right. To create an invisible but undeniable history of his trajectory, because when the time comes to talk about promotion, raise, recognition, what weighs most is not, "I think I deserve it." It's what I can prove. And this is not just to protect your career, it is for you to be clear about how much you have evolved, how much you have delivered, how much you have done to deserve. What I started to do was very simple. I created a personal folder with organized records, screenshots of feedback, copies of emails with praise, before and after reports of projects I led, screenshots of internal messages highlighting solutions I proposed, all with date, context, and impact. And as much as I didn't use it all the time, just knowing that I was there gave me emotional security. And at performance meetings, when I was asked about contributions, I didn't respond with vague memories. I showed data, findings, evolution. This posture transforms the conversation, because it is no longer subjective. It is no longer based on sympathy or the memory of the manager. It becomes a solid construction with evidence and arguments. And the best part? All this can be done without fuss. No need for confrontations, without sounding arrogant. You just need to be prepared. And do you know what is the biggest benefit of these three strategies? They work in any environment, whether you're new to the company, an ignored veteran, or someone who has missed out on too many opportunities. They do not require permission. They only demand a decision. Decide to stop being invisible. Decide to start positioning yourself intelligently. And decide to abandon once and for all the idea that being recognized depends on pleasing someone. By the way, if any of these strategies have already made sense to you, comment below. Tell me which one you most need to apply now. You can write silent visibility, horizontal reputation, or document impact? Just write that in the comments. Because when you declare what you're going to do, the brain registers it as a commitment. And I want to help you in this transformation process, and stay with me, because now we are going to take an even more important step. You already get the hang of the game. You already know what works. Now I'm going to show you how to shield your image emotionally, how to protect yourself from these opportunists, and how to build a reputation so solid that neither envy, nor gossip, nor favoritism are able to erase you. Let's continue. And after you understand all this, something changes inside you, really. It's as if that fog that made you doubt your worth starts to disappear. Because now you're no longer playing blind, you are conscious. You know you don't have to be the favorite, you don't have to be the boss's darling, you don't need to laugh at the forced jokes in the cup, you don't have to live to please those who only recognize the brilliance of those who shout louder. Because at the end of the day, you don't have to be the favorite. You need to be indispensable. This is the difference between those who live waiting for a chance and those who create opportunities even in the most toxic environments. Being promoted, and this needs to be recorded here, is not about flattery. It's not about forcing sympathy. It's not about fitting into a mold. Getting promoted is about emotional intelligence and strategic positioning. It's about making your work speak so loudly that the silence of others can't drown you out. It's about knowing when to appear, how to appear, and above all, why to appear. Because there are people who promote themselves all the time, but without support. It's foam, it's performance. And that kind of fake success eventually falls apart. Now, when you build your reputation on solid delivery, real impact, and a firm stance, you become a reference, and being a reference is something that no one can take away from you. It doesn't matter if the boss has his favorite. When your presence is strong, when your name circulates behind the scenes with respect, when your results speak for themselves, even favoritism loses strength, because no one can ignore for long someone who solves, delivers, and positions himself safely. And maybe you're wondering, but does this work for me? Does it work in my sector, in my company, with my type of work and boss? And the answer is, yes, it works. Because these strategies that I've shared here aren't based on luck or the type of boss you have. They are based on behavior, posture, and presence. And that you can adjust at any time. You don't need to change who you are. You don't need to become that loud professional who is always showing up for everything. Quite the opposite. What you need is to sharpen your presence, learn to play smart, to be remembered at the right times for the right reasons, to create a reputation that protects you even when they try to erase you. And let me tell you something important. You may be one. Attitude away from the turning point in your career. It can be that meeting where you will position yourself differently. It can be that email where you will show the real impact of what you did. It can be that sincere conversation with someone strategic in the company. Sometimes a small movement made with awareness changes everything. I say this with propriety because I didn't learn any of this in theory. I learned by being beaten, making mistakes, being ignored even after late nights solving cucumbers that no one wanted to take on. I learned from being left behind, having ideas stolen, projects dismantled, being called exaggerated when I tried to say what was happening. I lived it, and I came out the other side. That's why I'm here now, talking to you so clearly, because the path exists, and it's simpler than it sounds when you have direction. And if you've made it this far in this video, I already know one thing about you. You're committed to your evolution. And that alone puts you ahead of a lot of people. Because while others are getting lost in gossip, politicking, empty competition, you are here looking for strategy, intelligence, and truth. That says a lot about you. So now I'm going to make you a request. If this video helped you in any way, if it turned on a light, if it validated a feeling that you had been keeping quiet, click on the like button right now. It's not just for me. It's for the algorithm, which understands that this content is relevant and shows more people who are living exactly what you live. What's more, subscribe to the channel, really. I bring this kind of direct, real, no-nonsense content about conflicts at work, toxic environments, corporate sabotage, strategies to shield yourself and grow without having to play dirty. It's the kind of content you'll want to watch when that colleague tries to pull the rug out from under you, when the boss turns a blind eye to your effort, when you feel like you're falling behind, even though you're the most competent. Click subscribe now, activate the bell, and stay with me on this journey, because here you are not alone. And leave your comment below. I really want to know from you. Have you experienced this? Have you ever felt invisible even though you gave everything? Have you ever seen a wronged person being left behind? Tell me with the hashtag #Ja por eso, just like this, right there in the comments. Ja por eso. I read everything. I respond whenever I can. And it is through these reports that I create the next videos, with themes that really make a difference in your professional life. And to close, there is a video here on the side that is essential for you to watch now. It's the perfect continuation of that content. In it, I'll show you how to confront an unfair boss without losing your job. That's right, because in many cases, the problem is not the colleague. It is the leader who pretends not to see, who feeds the toxic climate, who values those who do, not deliver, and diminishes those who make a difference. Click on this video on the side. Watch it now, because I'm going to teach you exactly how to position yourself firmly, emotionally, intelligently, and without putting your career at risk. You deserve to be recognized, but more than that, you deserve to recognize yourself. So go there, watch this video now, and we'll continue this conversation there.